Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Grover Gallery Artist Talk. Tonight we are going to enjoy hearing more about Madden Grimes and his beautiful collection that we have back here in the gallery. I chose Madden to show here because as soon as I saw his sketchbook, or the very first piece of art that he made, I said, this person has a lot of talent. And not just like creativity, but like real draftsmanship and a sense of design. Just like the whole package. Some artists can draft things really well, but don't have the ability to edit that content, or they can draw really well, but are lacking creativity and ideas. But you have everything. You have this beautiful ball of all the goods. You're creative, you draft, you can edit and keep things really simple and keep them elegant, or you can turn up the detail, and you're very versatile as an artist. So I knew right away, I could have, just from one drawing alone, said, okay, this person should have a show here. So I'm very excited that you do. You do have a show here. I've really been looking forward to it.
I have a show here too. I will fully admit you asked me, and I spent an entire month frozen and freaking out about it. So, you know.
Well, it's my greatest pleasure, and I've been in your shoes where, when I was asked to have my first show and I had about a year to think about it, it is a little paralyzing, but it's a great thing to be able to lean into the deadline and have to do it. And you did it with flying colors. You really put together a professional, clean, beautiful show that's well thought out. For somebody of your age, I think that you are very impressive in your ability to think ahead and plan.
Thank you.
So, Madden, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself? You grew up here in Port Townsend, is that correct?
Yeah, I was born here. I have lived here my entire life. You could argue that I've lived in Ohio because my dad lives there and I would visit him for not insignificant stretches of time frequently as a kid, but I don't like Ohio, so I don't think myself as someone who lived there. But yeah, so I've lived here. I used to live uptown for the last 10 years of childhood into adulthood, and then I moved kind of more towards the edges of what's really Port Townsend, early 2020. So,
what are some of your earliest memories of Port Townsend?
Ooh, we could talk about the biggest spider I ever saw in the first house I actually remember living in, or we could talk about my fourth birthday party where I was painting paper cutout fish and putting glitter on them because that was pretty awesome.
And you were 4 and you remember that?
Yeah.
Have you always been creative and wanting to make things?
Yeah.
What are some of your earliest art making loves?
I kind of did everything. I really liked crafting and drawing, definitely. I didn't really start painting until much later. But I was drawing a lot. As a kid, I used pens and pencils, and I really liked Sharpies. But I also did lots of stuff with cutting up paper and gluing it together to make these tiny little intricate things and all kinds of stuff.
What was the subject matter that you enjoyed drawing as a kid?
Dragons. I drew
Period.
a lot of dragons. Yes, actually, for a very long period of time, it was literally just dragons.
Did you have anybody in your life who really encouraged you or mentored you?
I was encouraged in a way of they think art is a good thing and they think creativity in children is good, but I wasn't really mentored by anyone or taught by anyone. It was just oh yeah, you want a sketch pad? Okay, sure. You can have that.
But you probably showed promise at a young age. Did people say, oh, you're such a good artist?
Yes, I think for most of my life though, it was much more of a, oh, you're so good at art, as in, nobody else in this elementary school art class gives a crap about drawing. I mean, I was that kind of good as a kid. It was like, I love it, I genuinely love it, and therefore I'm putting a lot of more effort into it than other kids my age, but, you know, I wasn't anything exceptional, I think, because when I was small, I was just like, it was the only thing I cared about.
Obviously, you have studied a lot about drawing and perspective and anatomy, but you also can sew, you can knit. Where did you learn to do all these different things?
I was around these things a lot growing up, but I eventually taught myself kind of using the internet because, again, I wasn't really taught by anyone. All of my learning has been very self-motivated. But I was around it, so it wasn't particularly intimidating to me as a concept of learning to knit, learning to sew. It's like, oh yeah, I've seen a bunch of people who know how to do that, and let's be frank, some of them weren't very smart, so I could figure it out. You know.
Do you divide your time now between different kind of crafts and art activities, or do you feel like you kind of go on a focus for a while and then change direction?
It's a little more like I do treat art like a job. I treat art like a job, and like I need art and painting, and so I do treat it like a job. I like sit down and I plan things out. I'm very studious with them, and then all my other creative stuff, it's like, oh whatever, because it turns out good. I'm just gonna throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. If I like it, that's awesome, but it's mostly just something to do with my hands because I can't just loaf on the couch and watch TV. I need to be doing something. So that's a hobby. All the other stuff is squarely in hobby territory, and art is very serious. So it's like a fun thing to do where I don't need to think too much.
You make art every day, is that right?
I certainly try. I don't really succeed.
One thing I noticed was that you keep these sketchbooks, and in the sketchbooks, not only do you have beautiful pictures that you have spent a lot of time on to make them look really nice, but you also have studies, you do color studies, you're constantly learning and evolving as an artist. Can you talk about when you started keeping these books, and how do you use them for yourself to grow?
Yeah, so I actually I went through all my sketchbooks, and I found the very first one I did. It wasn't so much a sketchbook, it was more of an art journal before I really figured out that I wanted to really pursue art, to pursue excellence in art. But it was the first one that I filled back to cover, and it wasn't just a sketch pad that I tore out what I didn't like and whatever. So that was in 2017. So I would have been 17, 18, depending on what time of the year I started it. So yeah, that's how long I've been doing it. And I was much slower at first with filling up sketchbooks. But now I fill on average about 3 a year. And I'm on, you can check because of course I can't remember off the top of my head. We're on sketchbook 16 now, so. And yeah, I use them for everything. If I didn't use them for absolutely everything, I would have gone crazy trying to focus on such a narrow subject matter or theme. While working on this, I would have lost my mind. So sketchbooks actually have very little to do with these. And once I looked back on them, and they're mostly full of all the random stuff, I was like, I can't commit that much time to this. I need to commit it to the show. So I got it all in there.
Do you have kind of a regulated time that you work on the sketchbooks, or is it kind of just whenever you feel like it?
No, it's whenever I feel like it. Sometimes I'll do it for YouTube videos. Sometimes I'll be preparing for a painting, and I will fill in 2 or 3 pages with just swatching paint colors next to each other to see what's interesting to me, what I find interesting, what I think will work for the composition, for the painting, for the mood, what colors work with each other and how they behave, because watercolors, each color is going to behave in a very different way.
Do you primarily work with watercolors, or do you experiment with other web media?
I would say 90% of the time I'm working with watercolors. I do work with gouache occasionally, and a couple of these paintings do have a little tiny bit of gouache, just because it had the effect I was looking for. But I would say the majority of the time it's watercolor with a tiny bit of colored pencil.
And what's the process like? Do you kind of plan the painting out ahead of time? Like you have a concept that you're working on?
Definitely. I'll have like casual sketchbook time where I'm, an idea hits me or I'm bopping around on the internet looking for ideas and I get a couple and I put down a bunch of thumbnails. All the ideas, I sketch out these tiny, incredibly crappy thumbnails that look like they were drawn by a crazy person. And then just to keep the idea so I don't lose it. And then I come back to it later and I iterate on those thumbnails. I'll make new thumbnails, I'll adjust the composition, I'll be like, oh, what if this happened or that happened or our eyes were closed or whatever. And then and then it depends, but I'll usually move on to the sketch next. So I'll sketch it out full-sized in a sketchbook like this, at the exact size that I will be painting it. Then I'll trace it, transfer it onto watercolor paper, and then I'll usually start working through the colors I want to do in the sketchbook. Sometimes I'll work them out beforehand before I do the final sketch, but oftentimes I just forget until the last minute. And then I'll work through those, and then I have a plan for what colors I'm going to use, and then I start painting. And it never goes exactly to plan, but if I don't do all those steps, I definitely screw up a lot more.
Do you enjoy the planning process?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I enjoy doing a good job. Like, I genuinely enjoy putting in all the effort it takes to do something really well. Like, I say that, knitting and sewing, whatever, are like my hobbies, but I do take the time to do them well and do them right. I just have so much less pressure on myself. And I'm more open to experimenting and doing weird stuff. But I still take the time and I make a gauge swatch to make sure that my stitches are the right size to follow a pattern or whatever. So I just like that sort of work of doing things right.
I mean, it definitely shows. Everything's so clean and perfectly planned. There's a lot of math in what you do, honestly.
Yeah, but it's all eyeballing it, math.
You have an intuitive sense of it, perhaps. I think sewing and knitting and other crafts have a lot of math too, really.
I mostly ignore that. I'm not good at math.
And math is a four-letter word. It really is.
Yeah, I have a pretty good eye for balance, I would say. Balance and like estimating, are these the same size or are they different sizes? I'm usually pretty close.
Have you studied art, or do you feel like you just kind of learn from yourself and problem solve when need be?
I'm self-taught in the sense that I was the one curating my art education, but I was learning from other people online and stuff like that. But outside of that, I've never had like a really formal education in art. I went to public school arts classes where, like I said, I was the best person in class most, so just because I was the only person who was trying. And I had a couple of classes. I took like a summer class from Max Grover, and I took a class from a local artist. She moved to Alaska, but Council Langley. It was very hard to make sure that was actually her name because it's also a place, Langley, Washington, which has a city council, obviously, so that was a little confusing. But yeah, I took a class from her, and she's an incredible abstract artist, does some really incredible stuff, and she was teaching us like these mixed media painting techniques, and that was a lot of fun.
Who are some of your favorite artists?
Ooh, I wish I brought my paper with me where I wrote down all my answers.
Or like a genre.
I really like the Impressionists. They're a lot of fun. I like their colors and the feeling of motion. They'll often have lots of brush strokes that all go in the same direction and kind of flow throughout the painting. One thing I kind of noticed as we were hanging the pieces was that I also tend to do portraiture kind of the way they do, where the subject kind of stares directly at you, not in like that Victorian like, oh, I'm so sweet kind of way. I'm looking at you, but I'm so sweet or whatever. Like just staring at you, like dead at you. And I really like when they do that. I think it's fairly obvious that I have a large Art Nouveau influence. I really love Art Nouveau as an artistic movement. I also have a couple of Art Nouveau artists I really like. Of course, I like Alphonse Mucha, but he's the poster boy of Art Nouveau, so everyone likes him. Although when I see people talk about his art, I'm always like, but you're getting it wrong. But yeah, I love the balance that they have, the really incredible balance, and then of course, again, the motion and lines, the really elegant lines and everything. And I love how it really took over everything. Most of them were very multimedia, like they would paint and make advertisements and design silverware and wallpaper and lamps and furniture, and it was kind of crazy but also amazing. You know, everything that they made was just so beautiful, and it's so much more diverse than people tend to think. I have a lot of books about history, but yeah, mostly that. Lauren Marks, if I remember her name right, Lauren Marks is an artist I really like. You've seen some of her painting prints in my house, actually. But she has this art book called Sacred Decay, and it's really, really incredible because she's got these paintings and it's like animals and insects and plants, and they're all swirling together and they're all like alive and dying and decaying all at once, and it's very beautiful, and it has this sort of a lot of it has this sort of like halo effect on it, and it's just really stunningly done. She works in watercolors and ink. She inks in all these like incredibly minute details that I clearly don't quite have the patience for yet. But they're very gorgeous paintings. You've seen them. So you can attest to that. And then the other artist I really want to highlight, it's not so much in like styling, but I think he played a really big role in like keeping my brain creative as a kid, keeping me interested in having little worlds inside my head where I can actually come up with ideas. Walter Whitman? Oh God, that's embarrassing. But if I wasn't using my phone for that, I could check. But he is the artist behind the very, very popular, pretty famous I Spy Kids books. He's an illustrative photographer, or photographic illustrator, and he, along with a team, would arrange these scenes just so, and then take the photos for those books. And I was obsessed with those as a kid and the games, and I liked reading about them, how they were made. I've read interviews by him, and I would really just sit absorbed with those for hours, those books. I would go to the school library and I'd take all of them and I'd look through all of them. And then the video games, they made some PC games. They ran on Flash. And I played those a lot as a kid as well, and I was just absolutely obsessed. So he's been inspiring me both to like stay creative, and also he's actually inspired me to start playing around with learning to make miniatures recently, which is very fun.
What are you making miniatures with?
Everything, lots of stuff.
You're making like a diorama?
I'm making a room box, and it's kind of themed around this vintage plastic picture frame I got, which has like molded in little gold tassels over the red plastic, and then I got this vintage miniature sofa at a yard sale, and it matched the frame really well, so I'm making a little red living room themed around that little sofa.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to move back to the paintings for a minute. Can you select one of these paintings here and tell us how you came up with the inspiration and how the inspiration morphed as you worked on the painting and how you feel about it now?
Yeah, so the very first one is the green swans. That was the first one I did for the show. I actually did it right before I got invited, but that was what was on my mind at the time. So I was like, okay, I have a direction to go. But that one came into my head. I was looking around at pictures of flowers, and I saw a photo online of these cyclamen buds. Cyclamen is that little plant they sell around Christmas with the little heart-shaped leaves and the little upside-down umbrella-looking flowers. They're red and white and pink. And it was the buds, though, and they were all curled and pointy, and they were pink buds with these green stems, and they were arched, and the tips were together. Those look like green swans. And that kind of sparked almost this entire thing, because it gave me an entire direction to go in. But honestly, the thumbnail and then the final sketch barely changed at all. I went in and I was like, that's what I want to do. And that does happen a lot. I'm usually only refining subtle details because that's kind of what happens. I get ideas and I get them down because they tend to come just sort of fully formed like 90% of the time. But I do have the sketch if we want to see that.
Yes, let's see that.
Because it is one of the oldest ones. I bookmarked it and everything because I'm so professional. This page actually has 2 of the paintings. They're in this
And kind of the beginning of the third.
Yeah. So this is kind of the anchor point for starting the entire show. They're pretty small, I know. I could pass it along if you would like, but that's the thumbnail for the Green Swans, and as you can probably see, it's pretty similar, even at that tiny size.
Wow.
Well, you can't see the painting, but you'll see it another time. But yeah, this actually has like 3 of the paintings planned out, and they really didn't change that much. Yeah, some positions and details got adjusted, but nothing huge, nothing significant. Even the colors were pretty well solidified for that one.
Do you find yourself being satisfied with paintings, or do they go through a process where you're second guessing yourself, or you overwork them?
I'd say most of the time, especially if I don't rush myself, and I'm actually going through all the steps, I'm pretty confident, and at this point I do know like what an ugly stage for my art looks like, and I can be like, okay, this is fine, it'll be fine, because once I do this, it'll look like this, and then it'll be great. But other times, I'm like, oh dear, and then I'm like, okay, it's fine. Like the 2 swans, for that one, up until the last minute, I was like, is this gonna work? This looks weird. But then I added the blue, the dark blue around the eyes, and it all came together, and I was like, oh my god. That's usually what's missing. When I start to doubt something, it's usually just not high enough contrast. There's not a really dark or a really bright light color to balance it out. That's usually what ends up happening. But there are times where I'm like, oh no. And that oh no feeling is absolutely right. So Hunger, the one with the rabbit, that one is the second iteration of that painting. The first one got scrapped completely almost at the end.
Why?
I just realized that I had not planned out the shadows well enough, and I was like, I am literally just stumbling around in the dark. I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm messing up because of that. So I completely restarted it, and I actually adjusted the sketch too, because I realized there were some things about it that I didn't like, but that happened because I was rushing so much. I didn't take time to step back and think, okay, what do I need to do to make sure my next step goes well? And so I rushed the sketch, and I rushed planning the colors and the shadows and everything, and then I fucked up.
Well, that one is definitely one of my favorites in the whole show, so I'm glad that you started over and completed it.
Yeah,
I just scrap it and forget about it.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a painting up here that you want to hear more about?
Hunger.
Hunger?
Yeah.
Like the why is the rabbit in their mouth? Like
Because they're hungry. A big part of this was kind of like, I have this like big thorn in my side about like human exceptionalism, which is where people are like, no, we're not animals, we're humans, and that's different. and we're magically not animals somehow. It doesn't hold up to logic at all. But I'm kind of like fascinated by the fact that we're in fact predators. Like, we're predator animals. We hunt things. We're pursuit predators specifically. So we probably wouldn't be catching rabbits. But but we're also, you know, tool users, and so we hunt things in other ways. But yeah, I just think that those more animal emotions are all still inside of us. They're all a part of us, and I think pretending they don't exist is pretty harmful for evaluating how to make us happy and fulfilled as like human animals. So that's kind of what that's about. I wanted to have more paintings that would also explore how we're prey as well, but I didn't quite get to it. Yeah.
Next collection.
Next collection.
A question about your framing choices,
Mm-hmm.
because you clearly made choices to go with each painting, and that like enhances the painting. So what was that process like for you?
Honestly, I went down to the frame shop, and I have a terrible memory for names, but the lady who works there, Linda does such an incredible job. I was like, I don't know, I guess we'll just go with white. And she was like, well, hang on. And so she pulled out all these swatches and she was holding them. I was like, oh my God, you're right. You're absolutely right. That looks amazing. And so we had this back and forth where we were deciding on the colors from paper for the mat board around them. And then the frames themselves, I just wanted something that felt balanced but not like bulky or overdone. I'm honestly a huge fan of a gaudy, ornate frame, but I don't think it suits my art very well. So I wanted something that was kind of classical, but wasn't overbearing, very slim and kind of simple, because I didn't want it to overshadow the art at all. So I just picked two different models that some thicker ones to go on slightly larger paintings or darker paintings, and then the thinner red ones for the smaller ones. Except for one of them, because I ordered the wrong number of frames, and I had to fix up a frame that I already owned. So, you know, the one ornate frame that's all fancy looking is 100% repaired by me, and it's painted by the artist. I'm just very happy that I had something that worked, honestly. That was a stressful moment.
I feel like, having shown work a number of times, that happens every time.
Oh,
there
God.
is a frame snafu right at the end.
Sure hope not every time.
No, just count on it.
I'll just order extra.
That's probably smart.
So yeah, that's what that was. It was much less ingenious than it looks. That's Linda's genius. Linda's very good at her job.
She is.
David is good too.
Oh yeah,
Taking
David did
pictures.
all my photography for this, so I'll be able to do prints eventually, and they're both fantastic.
Was there somebody else who had a hand up?
Are they self-portraits?
No. Okay, so that night of the gallery walk, there were two consistent questions about, or assumptions about those faces. They were either self-portraits or they were women. I mean, if you are really determined to see them as women, that's your choice. You can do that. I'm not going to stop you. I can't. But I don't really paint women. I don't feel any inclination to paint women because any desire I have to see women in art is already fulfilled by literally everybody and their grandmother. Everybody paints naked women all the time. But they're also not self-portraits. I've been painting this character, this like pale with dark, long, straight hair figure, this guy, for a very long time before I had long hair. So he's just always kind of been a character in my art ever since I started painting. I just really like painting long, straight, black hair. It's really fun. I like the gravity it adds to a piece, how it interacts with gravity. So yeah, none of them are self-portraits. I might have a bias towards my own face, I guess. It's definitely possible.
Would it be possible that you're becoming that character?
That is possible. I do see that as a very like high form of beauty. So maybe I'm subconsciously changing my appearance to look more like that.
Can you talk about this quality of beauty? Like what are you wanting to achieve with your art in terms of beauty?
It kind of returns back to like human nature and how I think about that, because I think we all need beauty in our lives, right? We need beauty around us, surrounding us, because we kind of evolved for a place that we now see as like, oh, it's so nature's so beautiful. I wish I had more nature in my life. We're completely like cut off from our natural habitat, which is full of beauty, you know? And so I kind of think that making beautiful art is just like my way of getting more of that into the world, more beauty into the world for myself and for other people. And also I use a lot of lines and balances and things that we generally find beautiful in nature when we find it. You know, we like symmetry and balance, and we like smooth lines that go into each other in a way that like feels organic and gentle. We like a lot of that. So I think about that a lot, and color. I think we don't have enough color in our world. It's all very gray. Anytime I leave Port Townsend, it's like, yes, I'm out of Port Townsend, because everything is this hideous shade of gray brown. Yeah, concrete. And so a lot of our world is like that. It's very gray. It's very fashionable to have like white beige couches, so we can act like we're rich or something. I don't know. But color and just shape and line and form, and I try to make them really beautiful, because it's really important to me having beauty in the world.
And you enjoy decorating and making your own environment beautiful to be in. Is that correct?
Yeah, I enjoy it. I don't always succeed.
And you always have on nice clothes that look nice together.
Yes.
It's maybe something that you can't turn off, the desire for beauty.
No, I'm one of those people where it's just like, I'm not gonna own sweatpants. Other people are like, oh no, I just leave my house in sweatpants because they're so comfy. I'm like, I just don't own any. And then I never have to deal with that quandary.
I mean...
But also, I don't find what most people call comfy clothes comfortable. They're always like stretchy or plasticky, and then they pill and it's all nasty. And I like wiggling around because they're stretchy. It's like, this isn't uncomfortable. I'm much more comfortable in non-stretch clothes.
Don't you have something with an elastic waistband that's comfortable for lounging in?
I've got pajama pants, but I put them on so that I can go check the mail instead of actually putting on all my clothes.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
And you have some slip-on shoes, I'm assuming. Do you want a pair of Crocs?
These are slip-on shoes.
Those are nice ones.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes, we own Crocs.
Okay. So you
For
are...
crossing the yard.
I mean, I
never
think
leave the
once
house
you get
alone.
Crocs, like, you have to admit that they're pretty great, and that you are going
They
to
make
use them.
gross squeaky noises. I don't like
Okay.
them. And they always get like, I'll go out in the morning and they get water on my socks or my feet. I'm like,
But they're so easy.
yeah, but I'd rather have nice slip-on shoes.
What color are your Crocs?
Well, my boyfriend's old Crocs, so they're blue and gray, like everything else he owns.
So your work is very beautiful, but I would say that some of them, like Hunger, have an edge to them. They're not safe.
Yeah, I like to find beauty in things, but also the other thing that people do that I tend to really dislike is when they'll like see, I don't know, an adorable video of wolf puppies in nature, and it's like, oh my god, so innocent, but they also like grow up and they tear things apart, and they survive their first few years of life by eating puked up dead animal. Like, come on, it's nature. It's beautiful and it's dark, and pretending these things don't exist or living in this weird fantasy bubble where everything is cartoon puppies and rainbows and unicorn farts is like not actually healthy or helpful. I think we need to sit with discomfort sometimes. I think all of us need to sit with discomfort a little bit more than we do But yeah, no, I mean, one of them that has that isn't even super obvious is the Two Swans duel, because it's beautiful and it's balanced and all these elegant lines and whatever, but like that's literally how swans beat the crap out of each other over territory and finding a mate. Like they beat the crap out of each other with their longest necks because they're water giraffes. So like it's in most of them. Maybe not the one little flower all on its own. That was just a flower I found on a morning walk, and I was like, "That's so pretty. I'm gonna paint that." So that one doesn't have any deep meaning besides I found a pretty flower on my morning walk, and it made me happy. So yeah, gotta have a little bit of that too.
Does anyone have any questions right now?
I wanted to comment on how graphic your work is. I was going to ask where that came from, but I now know, because you said you were influenced by Art Nouveau, which is very graphic.
Yes.
So, but you haven't had any real training in it, so you've definitely picked it up.
Yeah,
quite well.
I do. Thank you. I do also take some inspiration from. I have a lot of like really interesting magazine illustrations saved from like 60s, 70s, 80s, really bold graphic colors and simple shapes filled in with flat colors. I really like that. From like Japan, but also one where I find a lot of interesting illustrations are like 70s, 60s teen magazines would have some really cool, like very hippie-ish illustrations that I found this one artist who does them. I wish I could remember her name, but she did all these illustrations for like these teen girl magazines, but they were like very hippie, long wavy hair, like all these like bold lines and flat colors, and it was just really, really nice. So I do definitely take a lot of inspiration from that. But less on like an individual artist basis, much more Art Nouveau period.
Questions?
Oh, okay.
No. You first.
You're probably going to ask something like this,
Maybe.
so I don't want to jump ahead, but I'm curious if, I know that preparing for a show can really kind of like help you build a lot of momentum and kind of take some leaps. And I was just wondering if you feel propelled toward what's next and what might be on the horizon for you, or if you have something you're working toward now.
Yeah, I'm honestly kind of trying to decide what to do next. I have several ideas about what I want to do next, but I haven't quite concretely decided. It's been a hard month to make any decisions. It's just like saying hi to so many people. But it definitely gave me some confidence in like my ability to complete things and get a lot of work done under a deadline. Because quite frankly, a lot of this work got done only a couple months before the show, even though I had a whole year to prepare. It was just like, okay, no more fucking around, we need to get this done. And so I was getting out 2 paintings a month. So most of the show was done in like the last 2-3 months before the show. So yeah, I definitely feel like I learned a lot about how much work I can do when I need to get a lot of work done. And that's given me some confidence. I have a lot of projects in mind, and I'm trying to balance the idea of pursuing those projects with pursuing the more businessy side of my art career, and like which one of these I want to tackle a big thing on next, if that makes sense. So, but I think I'm gonna have a little easier time when I'm doing less talking to the public. I'm doing a little more like, okay, alone in my brain, what do I want to do with my time? What are we doing next?
So now that that's been brought up, this is your first show?
Yes.
So talk about being an artist, and of course you wanted to show over a period of time, I'm sure. But what have you learned with this experience as far as what do you like about it, what don't you like about it?
I don't like how much framing materials cost.
Welcome to the party.
Yeah, no. Honestly, I don't like how uptight I am about needing to be alone to get things done. It's a real problem. But honestly, the other parts of preparing for a show I really enjoy. I like this is my first time kind of figuring out how I would do that and how I would come up with like a concentrated idea that would all go together. And I actually really enjoyed that process of making lots of thumbnails and thinking about which of these I want to make, which of these do I want to have go together, what colors am I going to have so that this is like not samey, but I don't want anything to clash too hard with anything else. Or it's like I'm looking at this collection I've got, and I'm like, okay, I've got this one painting that has red in it, and I want more red in the rest of the show to balance out, but I don't want them all to have the same color palette of red and light blue. You know, I want something else over there, but then I want something else that also has blue in it. You know, I actually really enjoy the process.
That's
like
curating, basically.
Yeah, curating an idea and distilling it down and collecting imagery to pull from. I actually found it really enjoyable. So
I think a lot of young artists find that it's a lot of work to do a show.
It's a lot of work. But it's mostly just work I enjoy. And I like just getting sucked into a project and being able to get in this zone of like thinking about what I'm doing and working on stuff. So
Right.
Yeah. And I enjoyed getting to know the people over at the Big Picture and getting to know them and being like, oh, these people are totally awesome, and I can come back to them for future stuff. I don't need to be, like stick with them for this show and then find someone else because they're awful. No, they're wonderful. They're super good at their jobs, and I'm just gonna stick with them forever. And now I know where to get my stuff photographed for forever, or get my stuff framed forever. So it's great.
So you are young, you're talented, you've got a lot going for you, and you live in Port Townsend, which is kind of a tiny little bubble. And there's not a lot of young people down here in Port Townsend, and maybe not a whole lot of opportunities for a young person pursuing the arts. What can you say about that? Do you see yourself staying here in Port Townsend?
Yes. Anyone who knows me personally will know that I am like allergic to the idea of moving away from Port Townsend. I've always lived here, and every time I leave, I'm either like, this is nice, but also not as nice as Port Townsend, or I'm like, this sucks. I want to go home. I'd say that the opportunity balance is kind of like split, because on the one hand, the art community has been like super, super welcoming and seems very like, oh my god, young person artist, yay! I'm so excited, new art, this is great. And on the other hand, yeah, there's like a smaller buyer pool, and it's not like Seattle where you can just wander around and the art scene feels very hip and lots of young people are going to look at art, right? It's mostly older people who go to look at art here as well. And so yeah, it's kind of tied, or mixed up. I do get the impression from watching shows and watching you all here at Max Kroger interact with people that some people in Seattle really know that Port Townsend is kind of happening when it comes to art. Like, it's a small town, but like we've got some really fucking great artists here, like some really good artists here. And I think that some, movers and shakers in Seattle know about that. So I think in that way, there's some opportunity. And also, I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket. Like, I've got YouTube, so I do have an audience online that I'm trying to keep up with, and I'm planning on having like an online store at some point, hopefully this year. And also like prints and maybe originals eventually, although that makes me so nervous to ship originals myself. But I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket. Although this is probably the basket that's honestly easiest. Convincing myself to video edit sometimes is is hard.
You do a good job at it. You
Thank
kept
you.
up on your blog really nicely. And do you get new subscribers? frequently?
I did when I was uploading things other than just my vlog. I had to slow down while I prepared for the show. I'm hoping to get more into it, but I think I do know what works when I have the time for it. So I definitely want to pick up on YouTube a little bit more going forward because I do miss it a lot. Like it's hard to convince myself to video edit, but once I'm in the zone, it's actually kind of nice. So yeah.
So this month at Grover Gallery, we haven't seen a whole lot of sales, and it's been a little disheartening. You haven't sold a piece in the show, and I have had some shows like that myself. Is there anybody else in here who's had a show where you didn't sell anything? Yeah. Does anybody want to talk about what that's like, and how do you deal with the obvious feelings of like, why didn't I sell anything, and what do I need to know?
I hadn't heard the question. I have been showing since 1975, and 95% of my shows don't sell anything. So it's just like, that's life. But this time I did sell something with my show down at Elevated. I sold a painting this month, so.
Was that your art down at Elevated? I
Yeah.
was down there recently. It looks great.
Thank you. So I'm used to not selling, and I don't let it get to me. And then when I do, I'm like, throw myself a little party. So it's just part of being an artist. You just don't know who's going to walk through the door.
And I would say it's really difficult to, I've done it for quite a while also, and I can't figure it out. I was in a contemporary art show in San Diego once, and there was a woman that, very well known across the country, does work acrylic in many ways similar to my work, and I thought she was gonna sell like crazy. And she actually took out two 20-foot booths, so it cost her a small fortune to be in this show. Had all kinds of work, small pieces, large pieces. She sold 2 pieces over the weekend for $400. And her work was like perfect for San Diego, but you just don't know.
I'm here to buy. Sweet.
Yeah, I feel like you now have a collection that's ready to go, and
That
I
is
think
reassuring.
I think that Seattle, Portland, these things, they should be on your radar and just build your collection.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the biggest disappointment of not selling is actually just like, oh, now I need to figure out what the.
Yeah.
My house is really small, and some of these are pretty big. I'm gonna need to like reorganize the attic. But yeah, so that's honestly, I really thought I would be more upset about not selling. But after that day, I was like, oh, this was a really weird day. And this is a really hard time to sell art in general, right after tax season or during tax season, and right after this whole shit show has started with our economy that we don't need to go into. And it was also like a really low turnout that day because it was just like a lot of shit was going on that day. So at the end of the day, I was like, well, I didn't sell anything, but I genuinely don't feel like it was my fault at all. So I don't feel bad. It's like, okay, it sucks that I'm gonna have to find somewhere to put it in the meantime while I figure out where else to show it. But, whoop-de-doo.
Yeah.
Can I add one observation? So I had a show on the very same walls that you have now, and didn't sell anything. And I actually wasn't that disappointed. Maybe a little surprised, but I didn't take it personally. And now I'm at the Port Townsend Gallery, as you know, and I just wanted to say that was a year ago. I feel so, not quite a year ago, it was last July, but I feel so distant from those paintings now. I just feel like that's not even who I am as an artist anymore. Like I've already moved really far. And so there's something about that too, right? Like we get really invested in what we're working on at the moment, and it's a great show, and then like we keep moving on, and our art keeps growing and moving, and so then like that's to me it just is this big long flow, and it keeps changing, and so I it's nice to be unattached to like, okay, that's already that's already in the past, and those paintings are in the past, and whatever, just keep moving.
I mean, obviously I would like to make money, but aside from that, I mostly want my paintings to sell because, like, if I keep them, what am I gonna do with them? My house is small. I would never own a house big enough to keep all the art I ever make in my lifetime. You know, they're just gonna sit around gathering dust if I keep them. So I'm not. I've heard some artists have a really hard time selling their work and like letting go of it. And I'm not like that because it's just gonna go in a closet somewhere and get dusty and never see the light of day, which is not why I made it. I made it to make something pretty, and pretty things exist to look at them. I'm not a crafts person. I don't make beautiful functional items. I make beautiful things that exist just to be pretty and look at them. Like, they exist to go on a wall and be looked at and make a space nice, and that's their only function.
Do you want your own art anymore?
I have some of it. I have some like pieces that I feel like were really big steps for me, and like I would never sell them because like some of them were just not that good. But like they're really sentimental to me because it was like, oh, this was a really big step forward for me in my journey of actually getting good at art. And so I keep, because I'm like, oh, look at how crappy, but how important this was. It's great. It's wonderfully crappy. It makes me so happy that it's so bad. You know, and I have those framed on my walls. I've got a couple of those, but I mostly want to keep my walls open for other people's art to inspire me, because you can only feed off your own art for so long. You know.
So, where do you see yourself in a year, in 5 years?
In a year, I want to have my YouTube channel like doing a little better, having a regular episode schedule again. I got into the Jeanette Best showcase for September, so I'll be there in a year because it carries over. I definitely like to have my website going, and I'd really like to have made some serious progress on a project I had to like set down to focus on the show. But I wrote the entire rough draft of a comic, and I started editing it and refining the script. And I'd really like to make some very serious progress on that, you know, because I want to make more comics, but I feel like I need to finish this one because the story is so like complete in my head, which is not something that normally happens when I write a story. Normally I'm like, yes, I have a beginning and an ending, or usually not an ending. And it's like, well, you're just gonna live back here somewhere until you figure out what's going on with you. But I actually had like a beginning, middle, end, and everything. So I would really like to get that done just to prove to myself that I can, honestly.
Do you have like a storyboard kind of laid out for this?
I probably will once I get a little farther on. But at the moment I just have like a script.
Does the comic involve the character that you have?
Surprisingly, no. No.
Are there human forms in the comic book?
Yes. They're going to be 2 little fairies. I don't know how tall they are. Probably about this big. I always be like, oh, they're going to be this tall, and then I completely forget about it. Like, I write it down on like a scrap of paper, and it ends up in the trash. I'm like, well, that thinking was all for naught. But I'll figure it out eventually. I know how big they need to be relative to certain other objects that are important to the story, so
Is it going to be a comic for kids or for adults?
Definitely more for adults, but not like an explicitly adult comic.
Excellent.
Yeah. But I'm one of those people where I'm like, fairies don't wear clothes. Why would they wear clothes? They're this big. Why would they wear clothes? And I'm like, well, it's not for kids anymore. Okay, I guess that's what it is. That's cool.
I'm happy to hear that. I feel like your work could easily translate to comics.
I have so many ideas in my head, and I've got an even more challenging but simple story. But this one that I want to work on right now will have like words, it'll be dialogue. But the next one I want to do after that will be silent. There will be no dialogue whatsoever, just pictures. And I want to try and tell a whole comic with just pictures.
You did bring a bunch of sketchbooks. Do you have any
Yes.
highlights from your sketchbooks that you'd like to share?
Yes, I have just highlights because otherwise it is just so much random brain vomit, because that's what these exist for. They exist to be shoved full of all of my bad ideas so that they don't end up in the finished work. All right, I've got two kinds of sketchbooks here. These are my brain vomit sketchbooks, and these are my final sketch sketchbooks, where I did the final sketch for the paintings, so we can actually see the graphite sketch and the trace, because I keep all of those because I'm a hoarder. So this is my current sketchbook, and I was working in this for the last little bit of the show, or preparing for the show. And so I've got some ideas that never really, they're really messy. So we might need to like pass this around or something. I've got some ideas that never really happened, but they did kind of pull into the same mood. So we could pass this around and then pass it back, and I can show the next relevant page, I suppose, if we want to do that. But it's pretty spread out, just random stuff. But that's what me coming up with an idea looks like. I'm doodling, usually in pen, sometimes in pencil, and then I'm just keeping it so I don't forget about it. And then I come back to it later, and I evaluate it and refine it and decide if I even want to make it and stuff like that. I could actually probably pass around a couple of sketchbooks like that. This one has some ideas. Again, most of those didn't end up happening, but these were all ideas I was coming up with while I was trying to figure out what I was doing for this show, which ideas would actually end up in the show and whatnot.
Did you bind that one?
This one? No. This was bound by John Hansen in Port Townsend. I don't know who he is. If anyone knows. You do? Cool. Awesome. I don't know how I got this book.
He used to be a bookmaker.
Yeah, well, it's gorgeous, and also I want to know what paper is in it because it's amazing. The paper's so good. This is like the best sketchbook paper ever.
I didn't realize that was such a good question.
It is. I have found sketchbooks before, but not this one.
He unfortunately passed away a number of years ago.
Oh, damn. This is like the first iteration of Earthly Delights. I can just pick this up, carry it over where we can see it a little better. But this one up here is the first iteration of it, and this whole page is full of mushrooms, and I tried to decide what kind of mushroom to use. And then I just went on the most generic possible mushroom ever, because I played a video game that had glowing green mushrooms in it. And that is the entire reason why I did those mushrooms in particular. Yeah, it's honestly weird to look back because it felt like I did so much sketching for this show. But looking back, there wasn't too much. Yeah, like we've got sketches of an idea that I later did, this page right here.
Yep.
And right next to doodles of how I would remodel my kitchen if I could, because it was designed by a crazy person. But that's probably the first iteration of the 5 hands painting. So
It's really fun to see those things.
yeah, and I'll see them spread out through several different sketchbooks because I'll do the thumbnail again in my current sketchbook if I did it a long time ago, because I'm like, okay, I want to do this idea, so I'll carry it over. And then I might carry it over to a third sketchbook even. And so, yeah, they just kind of sit around and move around and drift around in my brain for a while until I eventually decide to sketch them and take my sketches honestly usually take about a week. Because I tend to do all of it by hand, for lack of a better word. I don't use stencils or French curves or rulers most of the time. I tend to just brute force the right shape, so I end up all silver hand and smudges everywhere, and I'm like, I can't even keep erasing, it won't come up. So you'll probably see some of that in these when I eventually show those. And this is probably the oldest one that has any of those ideas. Yes, it is. Yeah, okay. This only has like one thing in it, and I already showed you, really. But if you want to pass that around, this last page here is relevant. You are welcome to flip through as long as you keep the page for other people, but like fair warning, you might be flashed with something. My sketchbook is not, safe for work, appropriate for children, etc.
It's funny, I've heard you remark many times that, oh, this is just messy, it's just sketches, but the average person can't do what you do. Like, your sketches are beautiful. They're really special. And I think that you easily do those things, and which is kind of disgusting. You just do it.
I'm decadent by nature.
There you go.
Yeah, but I've also been drawing since I was a kid, and I've been taking drawing seriously since, like actually following tutorials and trying to figure out what I'm doing since I was like 16, that's like 10 years now. So if I'm not at least somewhat good after 10 years, what am I even doing?
You probably have high standards for yourself, which will continue to cause you to improve your work.
I do.
Very good.
Thank you. I do hold myself to a very high standard, and I sometimes I tend to hold other people to that standard, which is a bit of a problem. But then I'll also hold myself to that standard, and I'll say something about it, and I'll be like, no, it's good. I'm like, but it's not what I wanted to be on the page, so therefore I didn't do it, and I don't feel bad about it. I self-critique. I don't self-criticize. I'll be like, well, that's shit, but it doesn't like hurt my feelings when I say that to myself. I'm like, okay, I'll make a better one next time. Like I'm gonna make bad art sometimes, and admitting it's bad isn't a bad thing, because if you can't admit when you've made a mistake, you can't improve.
You just have to be careful who you admit it to, because there are people who probably will think that you've never made a bad piece of art in your life. Only you.
No, I try not to down talk my art too much.
Good.
But more often too. So it's okay. But yeah, so just lots of mess, and then you have more questions, I'm sure.
I only have one more question, which is, if you could not do anything creative ever again, what work would you do?
What work would I do? But that's so difficult, because so many different jobs are creative, even if they're not art.
This is true.
It's true.
Maybe if it just had a modicum of creativity, if you could do something that wasn't making art.
I mean, every other alternative I've ever come up with, or a job, has been creative, just not art. Probably a more practical, like a craftsman type situation, a more practical form of art. I really like wood furniture and restoring wood furniture. I've done a couple of pieces for my own house. I've done some like small upholstery things, and that's cool. Or maybe just, I have thought about having like a vintage store full of like vintage items that I curate and sell, because that would be really fun. I think having a booth of vintage clothes sometimes to sell would be really, really fun, because I love finding weird but really high quality stuff. And sometimes I'll see something online, I'm like, I want to buy that, not to wear, just so that I can find the perfect person to wear this who will be so happy to own this, because it's so cool.
I would totally shop there.
Right?
You do a good job.
Right? Yeah, so probably that, actually, running a vintage store, vintage secondhand shop. That would be awesome. Yeah.
Does anybody else have any final questions? We're out of time.
Sketchbook feedback.
I know.
Sketchbook feedback. I do have the original sketches for these paintings with me. And I think they can be kind of interesting. Let's see. Yep, here it is. Here are my green swans and Asterion. No, I never played the video game. You know what I'm talking about. He's a character from some time. And then we've got the red swan, who changed actually quite a bit by the time he was painted. And I do keep the traces all the time, which made redoing that one a lot easier because I only had to adjust the sketch and then trace it again. I can always transfer them another time. I redid the hands on this about 7 times, if you can't tell. I adjusted the face on this one a little bit, but I just did it on the trace instead because that was easier. The rabbit was kept exactly the same because even as I was painting the horrible, messed up version, I was like, okay, this rabbit is perfect and I need to paint it exactly the same or I will never be happy with this painting. The swans I started and then I erased it all and I started doing these horrible, messy, bigger thumbnails so that I had a better idea of what the hell I was doing. And then the swans are actually, dual is an interesting one because the sketchbook is actually too small for it and I had to only sketch half of it. And yes, I did need to draw every single feather even though it actually isn't in the painting. So otherwise I don't know what's going on.
I have a question.
Yeah?
When did you decide you were going to do a painting that you didn't have like any piece of paper large enough for?
It needed to be big. It's a kind of grand imagery and it just wouldn't have worked small. So I ordered the largest piece of paper that I could feasibly work on in my studio, which is pretty small. And I had to tape it down to like some cardboard that it was shipped in order to have a workspace large enough for that piece of paper. So I had to sketch half of it and then flip this trace over and transfer it again. So, which is also in like 2 pieces for the wings and the faces. So that one was a little complicated. We've got Earthly Delights, which was a lot of very teeny tiny little lines for all those little mushrooms. And this one, the trace is in 3 pieces, just to make it a little easier to get it right. But I do sometimes go over my pencil sketches in ink just so I can see them really clearly through the tracing paper. If I've erased a lot and redone it a lot, it'll sometimes just be easier to trace over it in a dark ink instead of trying to trace it accurately through a thin film. And I think there's one in here. This is a really old sketchbook. I kept this going for a very long time. This one is the only one that was in this sketchbook. And this is what the trace looks like, but this is what the sketch looks like because I didn't see any reason to sketch all of the stem. So I just cut it in half and then added more in between before I actually put it on the watercolor paper. So that's that. That's been my show. If there are no other questions, I'm open to questions though. Although, like Julie said, we are technically out of time.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
Oh, you're just so freaking talented. Your sketchbooks are amazing.
Thank you. It's been a long time. Some of my old sketchbooks, I'm like, we don't open these.
Well, I know that you never really forget your first show, and I am very honored that that I got to invite you to have your first show because you are exceedingly talented, and I can't wait to see what you do with your future.
Thank you.
We're very lucky to have you in Port Townsend, and that you want to stay here.
Thank you. I'm honored that you invited me to show here. It
It's
is one of my
show.
favorite galleries in Port Townsend, so yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming, obviously. Especially since I had to change the dates. Or